the best. We don't know how long this particular situation is going to last, but in the meantime, perhaps we can use every bit of technology to continue our work. And I'll give everybody a chance, if they want, to be able to say something as a greeting to all, and can someone else pick up from where I leave off?
Yeah, I guess so. The first thing we had on the agenda was just kind of catch up. So we could just go around and talk briefly on how everything's affecting you in terms of, I don't know, anything really. I just thought that might be a good icebreaker to catch it, check in with everybody.
Good idea.
I can, kind of kick us off, and then whoever wants to jump in. For me, don't know if I'd say for me, it's a positive. I don't have to drive back and forth to Charlottesville anymore. So I'm here in the office all the time, which I enjoy. But so I'm just doing a lot more work since I don't have to be in the car as much, and all my classes are online. Other than that, nothing much has changed for me.
I'll go ahead. I'm on the board of Shenandoah Community Foundation, and we had a conference call board meeting. We were concerned about the normal grants cycle, that the awards are normally, well, in fact, the last meeting was to approve the recommendations, and we withheld some grant awards locally in order to create a reserve to deal with immediate needs due to CV-19 without knowing what those are yet. So we just said, let's just wait and don't distribute all this money yet. But when I say all this money, it wasn't a huge amount not distributed, like 30K maybe. I'm also on the board of Bell Grove, which is a historic museum, house museum, a 501c3 with paid staff. Clearly, we're getting no revenues, so every 501c3 is in, immediate agony over their finances. I think that's typical. We're anxious to see what the legislation might offer for those kind of organizations. But for 501c3s, the impact is immediate and profound and very daunting. Personally, I'm staying home. I live out in the country a bit, so I can go for walks with my wife. The lawn looks like it wants to get cut pretty soon, stuff like that, but we're well.
Thank you, John. As far as my routine, I make a point of I'm at the farm 3 times a day. I do have a calf in the barn, so his feeding schedule kind of drives what I do. If there's anything that has changed for me, it's just that I don't make any stops anymore. I don't make any. My trips to town are extremely limited. I go for gas. My concerns are, as I see so many businesses that are currently closed, obviously by order, but I'm wondering how well they'll be able to come back. John's concerned for the 501c3s. We have a lot of businesses here that I don't know how long this is going to last and how long they'll be able to sustain and maintain, and that, of course, is a concern to all of us.
This is Peggy. I'm not living much any differently than I usually am, although I miss getting out with some people from time to time. But basically, I'm at my house doing all my projects. I like it because I can get into the yard. I have a little more time than I did before, and it's awful to say that you know, it's been kind of good for me in a way. But I wonder too about some of our businesses, especially the new one that just moved into town here in Woodstock, and I think we only had a week of business before they were shut down, maybe 2 weeks. And the cafe's got, you know, new people running it, and they must be particularly concerned. And just a lot of new business trying to get started, and it's especially tough to get started. And I hope we can find ways to support them all as soon as we get back into business. Find things that we can do to help them catch up. I'm done.
Okay.
Well,
Mike, are you
I'll go
there?
next. Yeah, I'm here, Vito. You know, basically like everybody else, not going anywhere really, or at least anywhere where, you know, others may be. You know, doing things outside, so at least, you know, it's that time of year. Trying to be careful. That's about it. But I also didn't realize until it wasn't there how much I really enjoyed March Madness with basketball. But anyway, there's always next year, as they say. That's pretty much it.
Okay. Jacob, are you?
I'm here. Everything's pretty much the same. Getting to spend a lot more time with my wife and kids, and getting some projects done around the house and around the farm that there wasn't time before. Try to get them outside and be active and sane, but trying to answer questions cautiously and carefully, and just keep a positive outlook. But so far, so good, all things considered.
How old are your children?
9, one's about to turn 8 on Sunday, and 6, 7.
Now that's a really, it's must be kind of confusing, but they're old enough to know that something major is happening, and so I can see why it's really wonderful that you're talking to them. Who has a dog? Mine's asleep at the moment.
Mine was.
Jacob? Jacob?
Yes,
This is Vito. Your three children are all school age.
that's correct. And my wife is a kindergarten teacher. So obviously
So she's
it's a
kind of
bittersweet announcement. Yesterday or the other day, time flies, but we've been trying to do a daily regimen of reading and writing and arithmetic. But
Has there been, you have a situation where your wife is actually a teacher, but for the other folks, are there materials that are available, or is everyone on their own in terms of conducting, their homeschooling, so to speak?
Without venturing into territory that's not my specialty or my daily business, there was some preparation done prior to the cancellation of school, but there's as many online resources as humanly possible that are being available to all the students and parents. But obviously we know that can't reach everyone. So there's been an awesome effort by teachers and faculty and staff to reach out and make sure there's nobody in need of anything. So obviously there wasn't any protocol for anything like this established, but I'm sure that there will be something done in the near future. But that's that.
Scott, up in Strasburg, how's things going?
Well, it's pretty much the same. We all kind of huddled around, listened to the governor's announcement this afternoon. I guess the best ticket for our businesses to get back on their feet is to get this thing, get a rope around it and get it handled. And it sounds like we all need to cooperate in getting a handle on this virus. Again, somebody mentioned about kind of uncharted territories. It's kind of frustrating here being on the council here in Strasburg. Just a lack of, so difficult to communicate. You need 5 people to make a decision, but you sure would like to be able to help people out. You know, where do I get my groceries from? Am I allowed to go in the store? Or am I allowed to, you know, what is safe to do? What's not safe to do? We hear what's going on in other parts of the country, but obviously I don't think it's that bad right here in the county. But yeah, you know, we hear, you know, there are folks that have the virus here in town. And so, you know, how can we provide information as a local government so that people are prepared with accurate information and know the proper distances to keep and what they can do, what they can't do. We were for, you know, one of our neighbors, we were out yesterday, it was kind of a nice day, we were all out doing yard work. Found out that the Aldi's deliver, so we got connected with that, and you know, they were able to give us some beef and milk and things we weren't able to get locally anymore. So that turned out to be a welcome bit of advice from our neighbor. So we went out to the pound and got a new puppy. So our house was filled with dog again. And so that's what we've been doing, just kind of hanging out. I've never been so far ahead on the garden, so I guess there's a positive there. That's all I got.
Okay. All right. Well, I know that many people have been certainly affected directly because they can't go to work or their businesses are affected. So let's see. I'm looking on the list here. Is Brad still with us? I don't show him on my computer anymore. I don't know. In terms of communication,
I am listening intently.
Oh, there you are. Okay, Brad. I know you've got a lot of things on your plate with the county, with the budget and the like, and obviously public meetings are pretty much curtailed because people can't come. But you know, I know the churches are interested, but they're limited in what they can do as well, and other organizations. We have a bunch of folks here that probably are being adversely affected in some way, financially and money and the like. I think what Scott has mentioned about communication, how we can get the information out and find out who needs assistance, but yet we can't do anything in a sense because we've got to keep our distances and the like. I don't know what the county's role is going to be as we move along into this situation.
Can anybody hear me?
Yeah, well, I hear you now. Yes, yes, Brad. Is the county even able to do some planning in this regard? Brad?
Now he can't hear you. Hey, Brad.
Hello?
He's gone.
All right. Well, let's see. We've got, let's move through this, at least along with the schedule, or excuse me, the agenda. Tyler and I had at least one conversation on this, and that is we had created this 5-year schedule, which involved moving into public meetings at some point here later in the year. And of course, all of that is uncertain and unknown right now as to when public meetings are going to start again. But we do have a survey that's out. And Tyler, I'll let you speak to that. And maybe we can still promote, if you will, public input to the comp plan and continue to promote it through the survey, at least for the time being.
I did notice Brad did come back into the call in case. I don't know. Can you still hear us, Brad?
Yeah, I sure am.
Okay.
Okay, very good. I guess my original thought was how can the county help with public information and in identifying the folks that need help? I mean, not that we're in any position individually to do it except to write the check, I guess, to other organizations. But for those that are being adversely affected in ways financial or otherwise. Brad?
I'm sorry, what was your question, Vito?
The question is, that what does the county even see as its role in getting information out or helping us help others? I mean, this has to have some adverse effect to our citizens.
Oh, of course. And, but, you know, I'm doing what everybody else is doing, and that is staying away from everybody else.
Right. And that's what we all have to do right now. But we also kind of understand that many of our citizens are perhaps being adversely affected because whether they have no income or they're waiting for unemployment to kick in, and you know, I don't know. I don't know what.
And it's interesting you bring that up because, you know, not a few hours ago, I sent an email to a political friend of ours to say that, you know, his organization should be used for just that purpose, as opposed to playing any political games right now.
Mm-hmm.
Did the county discuss at all this issue? What it might be able to do to help people out?
No, we could barely even hear each other last night.
Oh, yeah. Oh, you did say it, but didn't work very well.
It was
Okay.
bad. It was really
Next
bad.
month.
This is delightful compared to that. Just delightful.
Mm. Well, all right. Well,
I'd like to.
Long.
This is John. I'd like to suggest we talk a bit about the survey and the schedule following. I need to leave the conversation before 6. And I thought I took the survey again, this time officially, because I had practiced it while we were developing it. And when I finished, since Barbara and I used the same email, she tried to do her input, and it said the browser was still open and she could not input. So if I was to talk to any citizen in Shenandoah County, Tyler, say I had a phone call, and I wanted to tell them about the survey, how would they access it?
Yeah, that's a good point. I'm glad you brought that up. One of the things I put on the survey when we sent it out was I tried to prevent what's called ballot stuffing. So,
Yes.
you know, to prevent someone from constantly retaking the survey and you know, giving us false results. So if you're using the same computer, likely it's going to have the same IP address. And so that's how the survey will track, respondents. So to not take the survey, I guess, on the same device would be one way to do it, but I can also turn that off if you all feel that we should turn that off.
Well, I think it's a reasonable caution to take, and not many people. Well, I didn't know if it was the same email address or the same location. But think about. I don't need an answer this evening, but think about a way that dual, a couple like John and Barbara can each input a survey, individually to the survey.
I just turned it off for now in case, because I think that's going to be an issue. A lot of people in families share the same computer. So if that's the way it's doing it, probably we shouldn't have it that way.
Hey, Tyler, whatever you're doing, is it either off or on? In other words, you couldn't limit responses from to 2 from the same IP address or something?
Yeah, no, it's just an off or on
Okay.
system. Well, so no, I could. So when we export all the data at the end, it's all going to be aligned with the IP address. So we could always run a process where it finds similar IP addresses and just kind of accounts for them. But I don't know. I mean, that's a complicated issue, because what if you have a household of 4,
Well,
and it really is 4 people taking it?
You can think about it. There might be a reasonable limit that you don't want to exceed, but it's just you've answered my question, so I'll tell Barbara to go ahead and take that. But my other question was, if I'm having a phone conversation with one of my Shenandoah County friends, and I tell them about the survey, what's the easiest way for them to find it so they can take it at home?
That's good. So I've put it on all the pages that I'm able to kind of monitor on the county website. So if they go to community development, planning, CAC, RAC, AFD, really anything in the planning area, they'll be able to.
Okay, that's good. That's a good answer. Just go to the county website and you'll find it. Yeah.
I think I'm going to talk to Josh, our IT department, and see if we can get a page. Ideally, I think it would be nice for us to have a page. It's just Shenandoah County /2045, because that would be very easy. But especially as we get in further with this. But yeah, that's a good point.
Yeah, it'd be nice to get a really wide and very wide range of people and large number of inputs.
For what it's worth, I failed the survey.
Who's that?
It's Brad.
How did you fail?
I just sat in my easy chair for at least a half an hour and just couldn't get it to work on my phone. Now I haven't tried it on my computer, my desktop, but it was a challenge, and I failed.
Hey, Tyler,
Mm-hmm.
as important as this survey is to the creation of the 2045 plan, it would seem like, and this might have been what you were talking about earlier, but a link on the county's just main homepage, just a link there that would take you right then to the survey.
I agree. Right now we don't have like a banner. A lot of counties will have like a banner system where I'll say like warning, flash flood, or something like that. We don't have that in the county. I'll talk to Josh and see, because ideally we have that in the census link.
Okay. Well, and since we have a supervisor involved with this meeting, he could even exert a little pressure where it would need to be, perhaps, if needed.
Once is the survey finalized?
The survey's finalized and out for the public now.
And everybody else had no problem completing it. Okay.
It worked for me, but I used a laptop, Brad.
Okay, then that's what I have to do. Then you want You want to specify that, because I'm not that dumb, and I tried to do it on a phone, and it didn't work. So you're going to want to tell folks not to use a phone, because it was a bear. Let me tell you.
Would it not open at all, Brad? Or
No, it opened, but it was just too much to do with the finger, you know. And a lot of our citizens don't have desktops, so they're just going to need to know that if they want to participate in this, you know, big grown-up survey, they're going to have to, you know, get in front of a laptop or a desktop.
Hey, Tyler, could you put a link on the town websites?
I can send it to the towns, but I don't manage the town's websites. But yeah, I could email them. I'll take a note for that. One thing too, I was thinking that we could do, and that might be something we can discuss, is if you all give me some ideas, I can make up some posters that we could take around the community. People could scan it with their phone and take it. It is more difficult to take it with your phone, like Brad was saying. And most of the questions, the way that we've made them, are better on a desktop. So I might just have to play around with and see if what exactly might be some of the. Do you remember which questions kind of held you up, Brad?
Oh, it was quite a few. I'm gonna turn back to it this evening and here on my desktop, and I'll get her done.
Okay, perfect. All right, well, I'll take a look at it and see what I can do. Because ideally, we can have it so people can take it on their phone.
Does the county in any resource have a Facebook page that this could be posted on?
We do have a Facebook. Yeah, I don't think they use it very often, but I'll see if we can get it on the Facebook page.
Okay.
I like the idea of posters, but unfortunately, right now, there's not many places you could put them where people will be going.
That's true.
Yeah.
I guess at the lowest end of technology, and after restrictions on interaction due to CV-19 go away, there should be a paper survey, right? So.
Yeah, I think that's something that we discussed was printing out a couple copies and taking it when we go across the county and just giving it to people there. They can take it while we're there and then give it to us when we leave.
Yeah. I mean, if I had 10 of them, I could hand them out. Well, I could leave them 3 feet from me and 3 feet from the person I was giving it to. I don't know. I think we could still hand out things to people or have some relationship. Throw them in their mailbox or just let them know what we're doing.
I see we do have another caller, and let me see if we can connect them. Hi, can you hear us?
Yes, Tyler. Stephen Curtis joined you.
Oh, hey, how are you, Mr. Curtis?
Very good.
We have Jacob Bowman, John Adamson, Scott Turndrup, Mike Liskey, Peggy Boston, Vito Gentile, Brad Pollock, and myself, and then you here.
Good. Thank you. Sorry I'm late.
Oh, no, you're good. We're glad to have you.
Yeah, it's a little bit garbled, but not too bad.
Okay. Stephen, this is Vito. We shared a few, personal situations because of the virus situation, and now we were talking about our outreach, of which the first part of it was the survey. I don't know whether you have attempted or looked at it since it went online. It is now released to the public, but Brad shared with us the fact that he had a great deal of difficulty trying to do it on the phone, which is something I hope they'll be able to resolve. But do you have any insights one way or another, whether on the survey or how we might continue to reach out even in these trying times?
Well, I must admit I've been a bit distracted in other things, so I haven't had a chance to look at it, but I can. And then I'll give you my comments and, by text or something.
Right. I think right now...
I don't want to have the meeting. You don't need to back up the meeting and my account is being late. I don't want to, go on and I'll catch up with you guys.
Yeah. I think at this point, though, because obviously no one anticipated the situation we're in. So we are hopeful that our initial encounter with county citizens through the survey is successful. And so any information such as Brad brought up that it is difficult, if impossible, to complete by phone, and the comments that John made that, two people couldn't do it at the same the same email because of a factor of how it was set up. All of these things are very important, and any information on difficulties or challenges and opportunities that we can provide to Tyler to make that survey accessible and available is what we're kind of looking at right now for the better.
I can remind our homeowners group, which is maybe about 20 people. We share a private road, so we have some communications. I can remind them to take a look at the survey. I haven't heard any of them mention. I walk with a couple of them regularly, and hasn't come up in conversation.
Well, I think individually, word of mouth, or however we communicate with our friends, neighbors, and family, all who are residents here in the county, all of those opportunities are there for each one of us to promote the survey. But we, more importantly, though, we want to know what the challenges are to have it completed,
right.
So that, if you will, work the bugs out to make it as available as possible.
Okay, well, I definitely will go in and look at it and see if I can get into it, and then I'll mention it to some friends, neighbors here.
Good. Anyone else has any comment here? I know we're hopeful, if you will, that our first public outreach through the survey will continue, regardless. And
I have a suggestion. I think it would be useful to use the public media to the extent that it's still, a lot of people pay attention, specifically to have a news article in local printed media, and perhaps a paid advertisement with, here, to please take the 2045 survey, here's how you access it, use a laptop, just however. I'm thinking of, a lot of us still read the Northern Virginia Daily, or the Courier, and
What?
yes, and so it's just another way to enhance awareness throughout the citizenry.
I can probably write a free story and try to make it really interesting and get it in the Courier in April. April's being published. Oh shoot, it would be May before they could get it. So
well, whenever it can be done.
Well, could we also send something out with the tax notices? Because they'll be going out in what, late April?
Yeah, they put stuff in there from time to time. So
pass a budget, that they'll be the tax rates will be set, and then the notices will go out. I can't imagine it's going to go out before. Brad, do we anticipate a date for when those notices, when the budget will be approved, and then the tax rate is set, and then the notices go out? Is that towards the end of April?
Yes, sir.
Okay, I don't know if what it would entail to have something added to that, and whether that's appropriate or not. I guess someone needs to ask the question. Maybe I think we brought it up at least once before in our conversation, but I don't know who really needs to be, other than perhaps the treasurer herself, as to what goes in the envelopes. But
So somebody just needs to ask Cindy.
yeah,
I can reach out to
that-
Cindy and find out what we can do. If she'll let us do a sheet, I'll make that up and get that out to you all.
And maybe just something very small, or something, you know, that won't take up much weight or room in the envelope. But a quarter sheet or half sheet or something on that order.
Do we have any idea what percentage of our populace actually take the newspaper or buy it? I mean, is that, I guess the paper probably knows that.
They know what their circulation is, and they probably know what their daily, sales are. They obviously have to print papers
Right.
To meet that demand.
I was just wondering how good it is as a public notification anymore.
Well, it's in the thousands. It's in the
obviously we
thousands, so
have
you're gonna.
we make public notices on all planning commission items, and we put.
Oh, no, I know it's the legal notification, but I just wonder sometimes it's becoming probably fewer and fewer. I mean, we did lose one paper, so we obviously know that.
Guys, I'll get the numbers for you for the 3 local papers, okay?
Oh, that'd be great. Yeah,
Okay.
thanks.
Tyler, this is Vito again. I know that Alex Bridges was interested and put the little piece about the CAC here the other day about this very meeting, about doing it in this format. Did Alex express any interest about maybe a separate piece on what we're doing for the 2045 plan?
Well, he had mentioned that he was going to, put that in that piece, but I don't know. I can reach out to Alex and see if he might be interested in setting in on our next meeting and maybe, interviewing us. And because what we're working on is certainly something I think that people would read about.
Yeah, I would imagine Alex would find it worthy, if you will, worthwhile. There's always a certain number of pieces that come out of our board meetings and a certain number of news items that are prepared to keep up with what's happening in each of the counties. Certainly, I would think something like this might be appropriate and interesting enough for the newsroom.
Oh, I agree. Mm-hmm. I can reach out to him and see what can happen.
And I know that because it's sort of the same people, if an item shows up in the Northern Virginia Daily, it may very well be in the Shenandoah Valley Herald for the weekly as well. So kind of like we get 2 times the money, so to speak.
So I guess getting back to about the survey. So like I said, we have 5 results, 5 people who have taken it so far. Although, it just went out last week. So to expect that we're going to get a lot more. And if we keep it open for a while, we'll likely get a lot more responses. And right now it's only really on the website and went out to a few people. So as it spreads, we'll probably get more people, and I'll reach out to, the treasurer, to Cindy, and see if we can get a letter or something.
I think that's called a bill insert.
Yeah, like a bill insert.
Yeah. Given the changes in activity due to CV-19, it's going to affect our schedule for, the whole planning process. We may decide that keeping the survey open longer than we might have anticipated is going to happen. You know, I don't know how we're going to work the schedule till we know when things are back to normal, but it gives us some time to kind of beat the bushes to allow or encourage high percentage of participation in the survey.
Right. And one of the good things about us adding, I guess, the zip code, at least, and the community name for where people are, we will be able to know when we start going to communities across the county where there are low response rates. And so we'll know generally how many, surveys, printed surveys we should take, or what to expect when we go into those communities, because we'll already have those numbers. In terms of when our meeting, I know we had discussed maybe having district meetings starting in June. I don't know if that's all that feasible now. So it may be, depending on how things develop, that we have to push things back until, I don't know, September or so.
You know, it's almost fruitless at this moment. I think we've got to let events unfold. But I agree, it will delay from what we were thinking earlier.
I think, yeah, that's, there's really no need to worry or fuss about it right now. We have to take it month by month, and I think at some point, several months away, we'll get some indication. And if not, we just have to, you're right, we'll just have to go by what we know.
Yeah, I think it's unrealistic to try and predict when the schedule might pick up again. So in the meantime, making our survey accessible and looking for opportunities to promote it is definitely, what our interest is right now, as far as the effect. Making the survey is as good as we can. We tried, and hopefully we have, and now getting people to take it.
Yeah, and I think the next few months, as we kind of scheduled out, are about, the background work in terms of knowing more about planning and zoning. And that's what, I guess discussion today will be about, but also methods of community engagement. What do you do when you get everybody in a room and you want them to talk? What do you exactly talk about? How do you make sure everybody's time is used in a way that it's valuable to everybody? So that might be a benefit to us. We might be able to test out a lot more. And as Vito and I have been talking, if this whole Zoom thing works well, it might open the door for us to have more public engagement, because now people can call in if they, have to watch their kids or they're sick or, what have you.
We have to be really well prepared when we go out to the public and have some sense of what their concerns are and what they're going to ask us and how we're going to respond. And I think we certainly have the capability of doing that. It's just, that's really critical. As far as, maybe people have more time on their hands, they may be more likely to take it. I don't know whether that's so or not. But we have what we have, so.
Just to kind of get you all in sort of visioning the next few months, right now on our schedule. Of course, this month we were discussing, updates on the survey, whatever, how things are going since it's out, and then the background on the history of planning and zoning, which we'll get into here soon. Next month, we wanted to again have an update on the survey results, look at what exactly a community design gathering would look like. What are some case studies, and then in May, what exactly in terms of legal code, and thinking about when we talk to people, what would you like to see in your community, and how that can translate into recommendations we can make with the comp plan, so that we don't I guess lead people out on a whim.
Yeah.
Now that we have likely more than 3 months to do this work, you can let me know now or later what else you'd like for me to kind of help pull together for you all.
So Tyler, I think, what I'm hearing kind of summing up on this is we're going to do look at a media. I think you'll find probably a good deal of our senior population does still read the daily or a local newspaper. We're going to do what we can do in our local communities, reach out through Facebook and to our local online resources. I'm thinking probably we should stay away from paper right now, just for transmission issues, just to be sure that staff is safe and who knows how this thing travels. So just focusing on our online efforts and media efforts, and we'll see where that takes us going into next month. Is that kind of where we're going?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, just send this out to everybody you can. Tell them that it's really only going to take them about 12 minutes for the main part of the survey. Now, if they want to take the whole thing, it might take them a half an hour. And if they're doing a business, it might take them a little bit longer because there's more questions for businesses. But yeah, just tell people and let them know too if they have language barriers for using it. I can only speak Spanish, but I tried a somewhat okay way of translating the survey into what I could find to be all the languages available that are in the county. So there should be no language barrier to using the survey.
Any other comments on the survey or outreach from other members present? Going once, going twice.
Let me see. This person here is muted. Can you hear us? We see that there's another guest here.
Okay.
Actually,
yeah.
Tyler, that was me again, Stephen. I cut myself off, and then I had to come back in.
The ComServe Woodstock, is that you?
Say again.
It says ComServe Woodstock iPad.
Oh,
I'm on my phone. I don't know that. Maybe there is someone else.
Tyler?
Hey, can you hear us?
Yes, I can. This is Joanne Poplar. I joined a little bit late. I had issues bringing up the application.
Oh, how are you doing?
Good, good.
Good. It was good to hear from you. Did you have any comments or anything about the survey?
No, all I would say is recruit me to do whatever you need to have done as far as getting the word out. More than happy to make phone calls or, post things on Facebook. Just let me know.
Perfect. Would it be helpful for you all if I make up like a template thing that people could share on social media?
That would be great, because at least that would be consistent messaging across the board.
I'll work on getting something out to everybody in terms of a short blurb or something that everybody can share on social media.
I'd really like to read that.
So what it sounds like, Tyler, this is of course Vito again, is if there's a way to make our survey perhaps more friendly to folks who want to complete it on their phones. I don't know. I mean, that's both technology and use, because I think there's a lot of folks that operate now entirely off their phones. But if we can make it more user friendly, and any other challenge that folks come up with, like how to access it, if there's other ways to post it on the county website, if there's other ways to link it to other things, that would be also helpful. And what else did we say? If Tyler, if you can provide a few, I don't know, standard things that people can post on their social media, at least to us, and and we can repost that or get it out. All those things would be very helpful in making it not only friendlier to the residents of the county, but to many more residents of the county to participate. Does that kind of sum it up?
Yeah, I think that does everything. Unless anybody else have anything?
Mike, are you trying to, Stephen? I see your names are coming up on my screen.
No,
so.
it's just sort of doing that. I'm just sitting here listening.
Okay.
I am as well. Like I say, I cut my calls off and by mistake, and then I came back in.
Okay. Let's see.
I'm still here, though.
John had to leave, I think.
I'm still here.
Jacob, you're still there, I think, right?
Yes.
Okay. All right. Let's see. If we move through the agenda, I don't know, any updates from our members on any meetings they might have attended, towns and districts. Maybe, let's see, we can, is Scott still with us?
Still here.
How are the towns, I mean, certainly you can speak from Strasburg's position, they still conducting their meetings, planning commission meetings, or in council meetings?
We're doing nothing right at the moment. So I'm gonna actually pass this format on to our town manager, and because it's be working pretty well, so maybe this can become a standard format here in the county, so that and the towns and the county, we can all link each other if we need to.
Yeah, I mean, I pass through Mount Jackson on some level of frequency, and I know most of the meetings, I'm sure, for the town of Mount Jackson have also been canceled. I mean, that's what, no one wants to promote, you know, the spread of the virus, so the easiest way to do that, perhaps, is to cancel meetings, but I imagine business still needs to go on.
Yeah, that's been the problem. Trying to deal with FOIA laws and yet communicate at the same time. So it's kind of, I guess, left staff kind of, they're trying to do the best they can. But yeah, I think this is it's just something we're gonna have to work through and get, but I think what Tyler's created here works really well. So I don't see any reason why we can do the same thing in the town level.
All right. Let's see. Tyler, did you have anything on the census, the 2020 census?
Other than it's out, so make sure you take your census.
Already finished.
I've done mine. It takes very little time.
Yeah, it took me about 5 minutes.
Very straightforward, very short, and as you say, just straight to the point. They just want to know how many folks are there, and I had actually completed the paper copy as soon as it came in, but then I went online, and it's extremely easy to complete online as well.
If you don't complete it, they'll come knocking on your door.
They may not.
Well, I don't know. Eventually, they were
I
supposed
think they're not
to.
going to. I think they said they weren't going to do that after. They can't do that.
They're challenged as well for with coming to speak to folks afterward, going to people's homes. So hopefully, more folks will complete it online.
Well, I know they're still in the because I actually applied for a job with them. And so I can tell you they still are, in fact, I have been accepted for a job, but they haven't provided any training yet. But they haven't said that they are not going to use us. So I don't know,
Well, they
normally
simply
they would go knock on the door.
They simply can't do that. And you shouldn't want
Well,
to take that job.
they wouldn't even start knocking on doors probably for a month.
They may have moved the date too, added more time to hand because of that. I don't know. I know they're trying to figure it out. That's all I know for sure.
like I say, they haven't told me as a prospective employee. Yeah, I think someone said they wouldn't start knocking on doors until June.
Well, I think that I think they moved it because, I mean, the volunteers should not do that job until it's safe.
Well, they're not volunteers. They knock
Well,
on
I mean, you
doors
get
with paid employees.
Yeah, I know. And you want to go there?
Well, no, I mean, like I say, it depends on the future. I'm not going to start knocking on doors next week, but the Census Bureau will have to make that decision. All I'm saying is that as far as I know, as a prospective employee, they haven't made the decision.
Yeah. Okay. Well, that's a good thing.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right, Tyler, let's move on to the history of planning and zoning, and enlighten and educate and inform us, please.
All right. Can you all see my screen now?
Tyler?
There it is. Okay, I got it.
I see you.
For those, I guess, who are on the phone, you won't be able to see the screen, but there are slides that are on our the event for this meeting.
Got it.
And Mike, I know you were on phone too. These are the slides that are in the package for the meeting.
Well, and actually, I have logged on so I can see the video, Vito.
Okay, very good.
Yeah, but thanks though.
Mm-hmm. All right, Tyler.
All right, so I know you all asked for just kind of a background on what exactly is planning and zoning, why we have it in the first place in the United States and across the world. So this is a very brief history from the early stages of planning and Rome to the current state of things. So does anyone know what this map is?
Well, the one I'm looking at right now is an Italian city. London is beneath it, but I don't. Let's see. I'm trying to see what unless it's a Spanish city.
Rome?
I'm looking.
Yes,
I
this is Rome.
recognize the names.
So this is a map that was made by. Oh my. Getting the name now. Basically, it's a Noli map, is what it's called. It's made by somebody who was trying to map public space in Rome, and so not only are the plazas and the streets shown on this in white, but also interior public spaces. So the pantheons, the churches, and all the other buildings which are public. Are shown in white in this map in order to kind of reveal how open and dynamic the city can be. It's an important map.
I'm sorry, what's the date on that map?
I don't have it off the top of my head. It would be 1701, I believe. Okay. Or no, not 1701. 1748. Yeah, 1748 is when he made the map. So it's an older, in terms of we're not talking about the start of Rome, right, but rather mapping the dynamics of Rome. One of the readings that I passed along to you all discusses the development of London and Paris. From each of these, you can understand how each city developed in different fashions. So what were the major differences? One being the use of open space. So in London, comparative to Paris, you'd see that there are a lot of open spaces put in place for recreational use, so for parks. Whereas in Paris, they were used for monuments, typically to the king or people of wealth or power. So it's a very different use of what is considered open or public space.
You said London Park.
What was that?
You said London was mostly parks, open space.
Well, no. Their open space, yeah, it was mostly parks. Mm-hmm.
Okay.
There was a use of nodes or central spaces in Paris, and in Paris it was much more so. It was towards the court, towards the monarch, or people in government. So it was a very kind of governmental sort of focus development. Whereas in London, the focus was on the market. So people would, gather around shops, as well as have, mobile vendors. Another big difference between Paris and London was that the walled development of Paris. I probably should be showing these as I go. So here's the image of the parks. So as you can see here, London. It's much more so a park, whereas in Paris, it's kind of a plaza, a monument to something. Here's
An homage to the king or whatever.
Correct. Mm-hmm. Here, what I was getting at with this is that the difference between London and Paris is that London holds the way it was developed was from a bunch of different villages that appeared throughout the landscape and eventually became London. Whereas Paris developed through different walls that held the city in due to attacks from foreign invaders, since they're on the mainland of Europe. And so as the walls expanded, so did the city. And these walls now are, of course, the major boulevards of Paris, so where people drive or travel. And so this different development, whereas, in England, in London and the United Kingdom, the sea was their wall. And so there's much more spread out single family homes compared to in Paris, where most families lived in multifamily dwellings. You can kind of see this here where, they're both urban in terms of like their scale and density, but the dynamic of that urbanism is different for Paris because it's much more so built for multiple uses, different families, whereas in London, it was much more one use, one family. You can see this again here, the difference in the type of facade. There's a lot more attention to, the architectural style for a lot of the buildings in Paris compared to London. In London, as they say in the reading, they would just paint the bricks black because it would, there wouldn't be any issues with the soot that would come from all the coal that was being burned.
Good idea.
So, did you all have any questions about that reading about like the conceptualization of understanding why Paris and London developed differently?
Oh, this is really cool information. I really like this a lot.
So this does anybody know what this map is?
Brewer Street.
Broad Street. Burlington
Great. Fulton Street. Well, it's in English.
Yeah, it's I think it is London again. So this is what's called John Snow's map. So John Snow was what they say is like the founder of modern epidemiology, where there was an issue with
Cholera.
people getting sick, And so what he did was he went through, he took a map and marked out where everybody was getting sick and marked out where the well pumps were. And so by doing that, and this is a much more modern map of that, what you might see a thematic map, he's able to determine what well pumps were infected. And so they were able to take the handles off the pumps and determine exactly, you know, what was causing the spread of that contagion. So it's just an important map in terms of history of planning, in terms of taking data and applying it onto a map and understanding the correlation between place and the issues at hand.
The picture looks familiar now. What we're doing. Cool.
These pictures are kind of different maps or developments that occurred in the Americas. So some, of course, influenced by European development, but others, such as, you know, the Mayans or Aztecs, they also had plans, and so did, you know, Native Americans, so Cahokia. So there's always been some form of planning in the United States, or the land that is now the United States. And then, you know, there was some stuff that got into the background on zoning. So why zoning is even there in the first place. As you'll notice, I can't say exactly when this started, but there was a typical practice in law, and it's still used today, called restrictive covenants. So, you know, when you buy a piece of land, it has covenants on it in terms of what you're able to do and the way you can develop it. So it might be like no livestock are allowed, public sewage must be dealt with in this manner, the fence must be, you know, no more than 36 inches in height. Those are just basically what is now zoning, was regulated through the courts. And so those ran with the land, and a lot of places in the county and other places in the US still have this on the deeds. Other things that came out of this as well, you have to understand that a lot of this started to occur in the post-Civil War era. Another thing that came out of this was the start of what are called racially restrictive covenants. So you might see something like this where it says, no person of any race other than those of the Caucasian or white race might occupy this building. And that was a way in terms of using the courts and these restrictive covenants to determine who lived where. So then we have actual, you know, the formal birth of zoning. So the formal birth of zoning kind of began with the shirtwaist factory fire in New York. So what happened was there was a factory in New York City, and because of the way the building was built, it did not have sprinklers or easy fire access or any easy way to kind of get everybody out if a fire were to happen. And so, as it says on that, you know, newspaper article, you know, 141 people died because there were no regulations to keep people safe. And so that kind of spurred the city to develop what is now, you know, I guess the start of zoning. So they began to develop zones across the city, not just for dealing with, you know, safety issues like fires and sprinklers and everything like that, but also access to fresh air and sunlight. So you see setback ordinances or step back ordinances. So these diagrams on the bottom kind of show what are the first what are called step back ordinances. So if you go to New York or other cities, you might see where, you know, a building will kind of go up for a bit and then go kick back and then go back up. The reason why they do that is so then the sunlight can kind of still hit the street. And so, and not just the street, but the other buildings. The reason why they had done that is that they'd found that when people don't have access to sunlight, it can tend to affect their health. And then we have the birth of what is called Euclidean zoning. You might have heard that a lot. Euclidean zoning is known as single-use zoning. So there's a commercial district, there's a business district, there's a residential district. It was the start of what is now modern-day zoning, and it began with the case of Euclid versus Ambler. There was Ambler wanted to develop a factory, and Euclid had said that, no, we have decided that this zone is not going to be used for industrial. It can only be used for, I believe it was commercial or something. So Ambler took them to court, and Euclid wound up winning this case because it was determined that the development of a zoning district or zoning in itself was in nature and in line with the government's duty to protect the health, safety, and welfare of the community. And so that kind of, that was the landmark case, which allowed for almost every locality to begin to implement this type of zoning where it's single use, only residential or commercial or industrial. And then
what's the timing on that, Tyler?
I want to say it was 1920.
I was going to say, is that into the 20th century?
Yes, we're now in the 20th century.
Right.
That would be 1900 something.
Yeah, early 1900s, I guess 1920s.
Yeah, 1926.
Okay, all right. Mm-hmm.
So, and getting into this too, the 1920s were very, changing and varied time in the United States. What we also saw at this time were, the speculative buying and lending practices occurring in the housing market. So you might see, kind of ads like this where it was saying, to call out for people living in white neighborhoods to watch out for who might be moving in. And so what they would call these, and the reason why I have this hand knocking on the door is they would call them blockbusters. So someone would go up to a community and say, you should probably sell your house to me. I've heard that, such and such family is going to be moving in right next door. And they'd say, well, I don't believe you. My house is worth this much, and I'm not going to sell it for you any cheaper. And then what they might do is, they'd have somebody walk by to trick them and sell their house at a lower price. And so that's what these blockbusters, they made a lot of money off of scare tactics in order to convince people to move out of the city. And at the same time, you see, communities taking that racially restrictive covenants into zoning. So you see racially restrictive zoning as well come up.
Tyler,
that brings us
can you elaborate? Excuse me, I'm sorry. I was just going to ask, can you elaborate on the second Ku Klux Klan wording?
Right. So the 1920s was also the resurgence of what's called, I guess, the second Ku Klux Klan. And so there are some historians and researchers who believe that the reason why this type of zoning and laws were coming into place was because of that rise of that sort of ideology.
So the other Ku Klux Klan was what, back in the 1800s then? I mean, I'm only familiar with, I guess, probably what we've heard the most.
Mm-hmm. There was a rise in the Ku Klux Klan in the 1920s, and
it's called.
It's sometimes it's the second, right?
It's when they started putting up all the statues and everything because too many black people were getting elected to offices, and they got pissed off about that, of course. And so the second Ku Klux is when, what is that era called? Anyway, that's where we got the problem with the monuments that everybody is fussing about were not a part of the Civil War or even after the Civil War. They came in the 20s and 30s as a fight against the progress that the Black people were making. Okay, that's my story.
Jim Crow.
Yes. Thank you very much. Who said that? Is
John.
that John?
Yes.
Jim Crow? That's Jim Crow. Yeah, Jim Crow. Be the second Ku Klux Klan, I guess.
And so that kind of ties into, when the market crashed in the 1920s, and we came into the Great Recession, Great Depression. What happened then is the U.S. government determined that we needed to restart the economy, and a way to do that would be to pump up the home market, to make sure that more people were buying homes. And the way to do that would be to create what is now the Federal Home Administration. And what the FHA, or the Federal Home Administration, Federal Housing Administration, did was they provided loans to people at a very low interest or no interest at all. And this allowed for a mass migration out of the city, what is known as suburbanization. So you'll see, of course, like the veterans loans, and then the other just single family home loans. The reason why it's important, I guess, in understanding the dynamics of zoning is, of course, as we try to avoid, as some people have tried to avoid suburbanization in the county, it's interesting to understand why it came up to be an issue in the first place. That drive highly was driven based on what is called the Homeowners Loan Corporation. They developed these maps of cities that are 50,000 or more. And in these maps, they would outline what are determined to be places of, high investment that you should definitely be investing in, to low investment that you should not invest in this at all. And one of the things that has come out of that is, and you might have saw in the email I shared with you all, the tracts that were listed as a low investment typically were places that were of minority or non-white groups. And so there are issues, I guess, in terms of the longevity and the implications over time of these. And what wound up happening is a lot of the places that were not invested in came back for urban renewal, which we'll get into, I guess, for this one. So I don't know if you've heard of the Futurama diet presentation that GM presented, where they said that the future of the city was to have cars running through the middle of it, these giant highways, and that everybody was going to be living in these massive skyscrapers. This was an idea pushed by an architect called Le Corbusier. This image here on the bottom left is actually what he thought Paris should look like. He thought that Paris should basically tear down as much of the city as they could and replace it with these high-rise towers. You see the same thing happening in New York with Robert Moses. And then you also see other types of implications in terms of the audio. This is a picture of Las Vegas. So the Las Vegas Strip, suddenly the viewer is paying attention to the signs rather than the facades. Then we get into what is known as urban renewal. And urban renewal impacted various sizes of communities. These pictures here on the top left are of Pittsburgh. So this was a neighborhood here that was slated. It was what was called redlined. You saw this map up here from HOLC. It's called redlining. It was redlined, and then later in the 60s, it was slated to be demolished and replaced with what is here a sports complex. Today, the site's vacant. In New York, there was a plan by Robert Moses to cut a giant freeway through the middle of the city. You might have heard of Jane Jacobs. She was a huge opponent of this. And then one closer to home, do you all know where Roses is in Harrisonburg?
Yes.
Yes. Yeah.
So this is where Roses would be. Originally this was a neighborhood, and it was taken out in order to build Roses, and I guess the Rockingham County government complex there. So it's happened in large cities to small cities. So it's just something to keep in mind in terms of the way planning is done and who is brought to the table. Then we had Ian McHarg. Ian McHarg, he really came around in the late 60s, 1969 is when he came out with Design with Nature. Design with Nature said that we need to think about the environment and nature first. And so this is actually a map of the valley. You can see Massanutten Mountain here. And so what he was mapping out here was soils and agriculture, forestry, everything that we do today. And he said we need to think in layers. What's the soil? What's the bedrock? What's all these dynamics of the environment that's going on with the land in order to understand why certain places should be developed and others should be conserved. At the same time, in the 70s, we see the rise of what's called new urbanism. So has anybody ever seen The Truman Show with Jim Carrey?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
So the community that was filmed in was called, I guess, Seaside, Florida. And that's right here. It was what's called a new urbanist community. It was supposed to be walkable, bikeable, a place that you could, with a lot of public space. And some people say it's one of the examples of a success story in terms of new urbanism. And you can see some pictures here of other renderings or ideas of what is new urbanism. Some people say that the Short Pump Center outside of Richmond is new urbanist. A lot of new urbanists believe that we work on a transect, so that human development is just like ecological development. So you start with there being nothing, just nature, no humans at all, to single family, homes, rural, maybe one house for every 50 or 20 acres, coming in through suburbs, denser suburbs, to less density urban and then higher density urban. So that's the concept that they push. They believe that all cities should have a transect. Then there's also transit-oriented development. So this concept that we need to focus development along our main transit corridors. That's typically argued for a couple reasons. One being, infrastructure. So where you're putting your high-speed internet, where you're putting your new electrical, sewage, water improvements, as well as public transportation. So these are typically put upon public transportation lines. I know we brought this up at our last meeting when talking about the potential bus line that was proposed in the county, and that transit-oriented development would say that having the bus line would allow for more development in the towns, as people would be able to travel up and down Route 11. That's just, I guess, an example of that. Then we have people who call for what's called green infrastructure. So Karen Firehawk, she's actually a professor at UVA, argues that we need to, just like Ian McHarg, that we need to map nature first. So she argues that we need to determine what are the main cores and corridors in terms of the deer and other animals in the community and where they travel. What is, their thoughts of the space? And that, and then you have people as well who believe that not only should, nature be considered in terms of preventing development in certain areas, but that development should be done in a way that it allows for coexistence. So there's, like a very famous one is there's a bridge in I think Austin, Texas, which has these special areas built for bats to stay in. And so, people are able to use the bridge for driving and walking, but also the bats have a home because a lot of them were displaced when the human development occurred.
Well, of course, one thing, as you know, Tyler, that is being done currently is a lot of retrofittings going on to benefit wildlife movements and whatnot, with roads especially, or interstates, major roads.
Yeah. I think a lot of interstates now are, building in those fences to prevent deer from jumping across the interstate, or doing the culverts underneath the interstate, so then the wildlife is directed under. That would be an example of that kind of planning.
And Tyler, if you don't mind, could you go back, I guess maybe 2 slides, that corridor slide you had up?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that one there. And I understand what you're saying about the major road networks, but of course, like here in the county, we've got the overlay district for Route 11.
Right. Mm-hmm.
Any comment? And I'm not opposed to the overlay district, but can you perhaps enlighten us a bit where you have a major corridor, but yet there's some thought that has been given to maintaining some of the historical nature, and then I guess reconciling the sort of the two things.
Yeah, no, that's a great point to bring up. Trying to think of a way. Typically, I'd grab like the whiteboard or something to help describe this. I'm thinking of a way I could do this. Here, I've got this. So, typically you have, a road. So, from point A to point B. And then what you have are what are called streets. So a street, might have, a more of a grid, like the downtown. So, you walk here, you can go around the blocks. What can happen if you have transit-oriented development in a way that, it escapes the stops? Because if the bus were to stop, let's say, every mile, no one would get anywhere, or where you'd get might be just as fast as walking or biking. So setting things, I guess a mile is not, but you get my point. If we have shorter stops, the bus will go slower. And so the Route 11 overlay district, what that does is it's supposed to direct growth into the towns. And so by doing that as well, what you wind up doing is you prevent additional traffic coming onto Route 11 in the middle areas. And so when you get off the bus, you actually get off in an area that is supposed to be built for walking, and the towns you're supposed to walk around. Whereas I think there's parts of Route 11 down in Augusta which they don't have an overlay. And you'll see it's a lot of, curb cuts and people pulling in and out in a more strip mall kind of sense. Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, I'm following you. Yeah. Okay.
And this map here is it's a bit different since it's a city. I think that's New York as well. So, it's a little bit different if you're in a very dense city, because people are going to be walking and using other modes anyways. This is a little bit more like, I guess, us would be, you have a couple stops, And so if you put all development within, a 15-minute or 20-minute walking radius from those stops, more people are likely to use the stops, and the stops will likely be faster because there's not a lot more automobile traffic on the road.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
That's a good question. And now we kind of have gotten into a weird phase, I guess, in terms of planning. Some people argue that the city cannot be contained, that the city is this growing amalgamation which changes and varies, and that holding on to an idea of what the ideal city is or the ideal urbanism is would lead you down the wrong path. And Rem Koolhaas, he's a very important, I guess, architect in terms of this field, argues that rural areas, so places like where we live, are actually a lot more dynamic than they first appear. So he kind of has marked out here, what are the different uses in the countryside? Saying that, although this may just look like a big, countryside, farmland, there's actually offices, there's marinas, souvenir shops, camping areas, farms, sculpture gardens, all this, dynamics occurring in the background. But also to discuss how the rural, I guess what we are, rural, has become industrialized. It's now an extension of the city. He points to, of course, like these big box stores. So you see these massive buildings that come into play in terms of allowing for all these shipment areas for Amazon or Google or all these companies, and also the mass industrialization of agriculture. So this is a cattle field in Idaho, and what you start to find out there in terms of the future, the possible futures of farming and rural places as what's called the territory of the city. That's what a lot of people call it. You start to see that the rural area becomes basically mechanized. So now you see places in Europe which have driverless tractors. So someone will sit at a desk behind a computer and tell the tractor where to go and do everything, or they might have something where it tells the cows to come in at a certain time and milks them automatically. So you see a huge change, I guess, in terms of what is rural. And another mode in terms of understanding planning is the idea of, you've probably heard of the term gentrification. And a lot of people really struggle with understanding what exactly gentrification is. Gentrification, to summarize, to make it short for you, which is why I've kind of tried to work it in terms of how it's related to past planning. Gentrification is basically displacement. So it's when one group of people, culture, individuals, what have you, because technically, if you get down to the technicality, gentrification can occur in ways that it displaces wildlife or farming. It is the substitution for one group for another in a way that the identity of a place changes. So you might see a lot of these pictures which look really, really nice, wonderful. You have like a happy duck here, but these are images which are typically done in ways that don't involve the communities. They're top-down plans where someone might say, well, we need more office space. We need more residential space, but their solution is to top-down rezone or remake everything. Very similar to what we saw in the urban renewal era of planning. And that's where we kind of get into, I guess, the wrapping up the end of where we are in planning. A lot of people call for the citizen co-production of plans and citizen co-production of thought and ways to work towards the future. one of the most important things, I guess, to take from this slide is the idea of what's called Arnstein's ladder of participation, and to understand what level of the ladder you're at. So are you at citizen control, where the citizens are in control of the process? You know, they have ownership over what is being made. They have full right to communicate, to discuss what's going on. Or, you know, have they been delegated that power? So do they not really have that power, but they've been delegated, you know, that you still hold the power? Or is it a partnership where you have equal power? You know, it's just important, I guess, in understanding when you go into a place like we hope to plan to go to these communities, where we are in terms of power dynamics, and hopefully, you know, we can be, like I said, the counter narrative of planning, where we involve citizens more. So to kind of wrap that up, I just had a couple questions if you all want to use them as discussion. The first being, what can we as a group, in terms of jumping into Shenandoah County's 2045 plan and going to the communities, learn from the past?
Tyler?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Okay. I would say if I know that different parts of this were of interest to some, if not all, the documents, the supporting documents that were in the package, if you will, that you provided to us, provides additional information for a lot of this. And I would encourage those that have the interest, and in all, to go through those documents for additional insight into the history of planning and these different terms and the like. I notice here on the agenda that you had allowed for 4 questions and discussion. Is there some kind of an exercise you wanted us to complete?
Not really, just to be able to read up and understand. You know, typically a lot of questions I will get is why we have planning in the first place. So I just didn't know if it might be helpful for you all to understand, you know, the background of, you know, zoning coming from, you know, the courts, and that planning in itself has always been done in some way, but the way that it's done now really came about in the 20s and 30s. And in terms of understanding, I guess, poor ways planning has been done, I guess, in terms of top-down planning, and how we can learn from mistakes, I guess, that were made.
Yeah. I know in your last slide there where it showed citizen involvement, I couldn't help but think that here we are as citizens helping to, if you will, develop or update the comprehensive plan. We have active participation of citizens. That's what we're talking about in the first part of our meeting, trying to encourage the citizens of the county to participate in our survey. So we have a partnership and an active participation. I don't say we go right into planning, but certainly we are trying to develop the plan upon which our ordinances and the like would be developed. John, comment?
Well, very interesting and pertinent as background, and thanks, Tyler. Yeah, we're probably better than many in terms of keeping the citizens as part of the process.
So Tyler, I think it's been interesting in Strasbourg as we've been dealing with zoning issues, and we look at what the founders created. There's a neat little sketch of the original lots that were drawn up back in the 18th century, and this idea of separate uses really wasn't how small towns work. You know, we have a lot of businesses. First of all, businesses and residences right next to each other on Main Street. There are no setbacks. Some of them run right up to the street. But traditionally, you had your businesses on the bottom, and residences living on top of their stores, right next to 3-story homes. So it's been, well, when we talked about 10 years ago about our downtown was certainly not thriving, and what do people want? And we had a room full, and they said, we want to save our downtown, and we want it the way we remember it being, or maybe a 21st century version of what it was. And so we kind of took that and led towards the ideas that maybe having separate residential and commercial wasn't the greatest thing for Strasbourg, and actually a mixture of uses worked better, where people could shop and work and walk and get to parks and do all that without having to get into a car. So we found, I found, learning about zoning, it's a powerful tool. Sometimes it can be used as a weapon, you can see in the past. And it's something that clearly our people need to be educated about what zoning is and how it can be used. I don't know if properly is the right word, but used in a way that feels like it brings us together rather than sets us apart.
Tyler, I think several meetings ago when you were talking about some of the history, I would imagine that towns, when they were laid out in the platted in the 1750s and 60s and 70s, certainly in the case of Strasbourg and Woodstock, were probably laid out following a European village model, possibly what some of the original folks brought from Europe, from Germany.
Yep, that's correct. And you probably noticed that too with the grid networks in each of the towns. The reason why the grids are the size that they are is because you got to think of the most common mode of transit back then was horse and buggy or by foot, or I guess if you're lucky to have a bike, you could also bike, but everything had to be close.
Mm-hmm. And now we have determined that people still want to be close, certainly in the towns, to keep the same historical and social fabric of the towns, and people don't want to lose that.
I'm leaving. Thanks, Tyler. Thanks, Vito.
Right,
Thank
John.
you, John. Thank
Very
you for
good.
coming.
Night.
John.
Do we have, it's just about 7 o'clock right now. We have any final comments from the members? Otherwise, I'll turn it over to Tyler and we'll talk about, just very quickly, we're going to try and do this again in April, our next meeting, April 22nd.
Yeah, Tyler, thanks for the information on zoning. That was very
Oh, no,
Tyler?
thank you for setting in on the call.
This was cool. Worked very well, I think.
All right, well, good. And
Everyone
so
be
we'll,
safe.
Tyler, if you want to summarize with an email or give us some additional information, and like I say, I encourage everyone to take a look at the readings that supported Tyler's presentation. And unless we hear otherwise, we're going to try and do this again April 22nd, and we'll meet at 5 o'clock.
All righty, be well, everyone.
Good night.
Night.
Yep, take care. Stay
Yeah.
safe, everybody.
Thanks so much,
All right.
Tyler. It was a good meeting.
Thank you. Thank you all for coming.
All right, Tyler, thank you.
Good night.
Thank you. Good night.
Night, and thank everyone for their time. And I thank everyone for participating. And everyone stay safe and be well.